Hello there and welcome friends. This is a beginner's guide for everything you need to know about how to play a dexterity based character in Elden Ring, with the locations for the best weapons, ashes of war and abilities that you can all get at the very start of the game to really empower your character to the point where you can easily take on any of the challenges the open world has to offer. And trust me when I say that dexterity dual wielding characters can be very powerful in this game, especially when you add the bleed status ailments to your attacks. So without further ado, let's get started. Now ideally you want to start with the bandit class if you want a character that dual wields daggers, which is what this build will be mostly focused on, for a fast flurry of very powerful attacks that easily bleed the enemies to death, no matter how high their hit points are. And this will also work even for the vast majority of bosses. Bandits also start with very high arcane, which is perfect for a completely overpowered dagger weapon that we are going to get as soon as we enter the game. And this build will get stats to basically wield any of the dexterity weapons. So even if you want to use katanas, you can also go with bandit. For Keepsake, go with the golden seed as usual to increase the number of your flasks at the very start of the game. Very helpful. Now because this will be a dual wielding build, let's talk about how the mechanics of dual wielding work. If you want to properly dual wield your weapons, then you have to equip weapons of the same type on each one of your hands. For example, I have actually the same weapon here, a great knife on my right hand and also another great knife on my left hand. After doing this, press LB and you get to attack with both of your weapons at once for a very fast flurry of attacks. If you use the normal button for attacks, so RB, you only attack with your right hand weapon. So don't do that, you want to attack with both of them. As I said, your weapons have to be of the same type. If I, for example, equip a straight sword on my left hand, I won't get to attack with both weapons, no matter what button you are pressing. Second, to use your special abilities when dual wielding, press LT or L2, and there we go. It's as simple as that. So LB for dual wielding attacks, and LT for your special attack. Also remember that you cannot dual wield when riding your horse. With that out of the way, let's get started on how to get our best weapons at the very start of the game. So as a bandit, you'll start with a great knife, which is actually a pretty respectable dagger. Later on we'll get another copy of this to dual wield it. But for the very beginning, what you really want to get is the Reduvia dagger. Reduvia not only causes blood loss on hit and attacks very fast, so the enemy will suffer from bleed super fast, but also has a very unique skill called Reduvia Blood Blade. As always, press your left trigger or L2 to cast it, and at the cost of some FP it will fire a blood projectile at the enemy that not only deals pretty high damage, it can also inflict bleed. Let's try the Knight of a Shield here. So he was already inflicted with blood loss after 3 hits, which is how he took the big damage. When you see this blood explosion coming out of the enemy, that's when the bleed effect really hit. Getting a Reduvia is pretty simple, and here's how it goes. So what you want to do is head to the Ague Lake North Grace, using our first grace as reference. So the first step, you just have to go northeast a little bit. Now once you reach the Ague Lake North, all you have to do is head east and drop down in this river section here. So let's head right there. Now you will be invaded by a hostile NPC there. He is controlled by the game, so will work even if you are offline. And since you can die, I recommend you do this without any runes, so you don't lose anything. But you know, we are still just level 6, which is 1 level above from the start of the game as a bandit. So it's not like we're going to lose anything. So head over to the sides here, so we can actually drop down to the river without taking damage. So drop down here. We took some damage, but that's fine. You will automatically dismount your horse, and you'll soon get invaded by the NPC. Just keep going. Alright, so invaded by Bloody Finger Nerijus. He can be pretty tough, so what I recommend you do is just avoid his attacks for the first part of the battle, because you'll soon get aided by another NPC who will pretty much carry you for the whole battle. Just keep avoiding his hits. Of course you can try fighting him first, but since we are at the very start of the game, I don't really recommend it. Careful with the ranged dagger attack, which does inflict bleed I mean. So just wait a little bit and the NPC is going to come to help us. Alright, so Bloody Finger Hunter Yura was summoned. Wait for him to aggro the invader. He's coming from right there. Let's draw him to our character. Wait for him to aggro Nerijus. And then you can start getting some free hits while he tanks for you. Just wait for him to take the aggro again. 1 or 2 swipes. And then back out. See, it's pretty easy when you have your NPC to help you. And there we go, Bloody Finger Nerijus was felled. And now we get the extremely overpowered Reduvia Dagger. Now that we already have our Reduvia Dagger, we want to empower our starter Great Knife with even higher bleed loss buildup for faster bleed procs, but most importantly also with the Bloody Slash skill from an Ash of War. Bloody Slash is not only somewhat of a ranged skill, so you can hit the enemy at somewhat medium range. It's also unique in that it costs both FP and also some of your hit points. But man, trust me, it's a super powerful skill. The damage is simply off the charts, for super high damage even against bosses. And here's how you can get this. First, I recommend you go right here to the Third Church of Marika, so you can unlock your Mixing Flask. Taking the starter area as reference, the first step Grace, follow the road here, then down a bit, then northeast, and you'll easily reach the Third Church of Marika. Do this on horseback and you won't be bothered by any of the enemies along the way. So loot the item here for a sacred tier to empower our flask, but most importantly, the Flask of Wondrous Physic. This is going to become your best friend because you'll soon be able to enhance your flask with effects, for example, that increase your dexterity, damage and bleed effects. Now to actually get our Bloody Slash Ash of War from the Third Church of Marika, you simply have to go southeast. So follow along the road here, cross the minor Erd tree, and you'll soon reach Fort Haft. Because you'll have to fight a somewhat tough enemy inside to get your Ash of War, I recommend you do this with at least the starter Triple Wolf summons. I already have a guide linked to the side here on how you can get your summon abilities even at the early game. So you can already see the fort there at the distance. Now, because you can die here, I also recommend you do it without any runes. Anyways, let's resume our fort track. Careful with the archers. You might as well loot a golden seed here. You want to draw the big pumpkin head enemy over there, down the stairs, and to where you are. So he doesn't follow you up the fort, otherwise he will interfere with the, well, not boss, but there's a strong enemy above the fort that we have to defeat to get the Ashes of War we need. So just draw the pumpkin head enemy out. He'll even start attacking the other enemies, which is perfect for us. So now we have to enter the fort. So first, go to the right here, as to avoid the fire flask throwing enemies, then up the stairs, to the side here, keep going up. Careful with the other flask throwers, then go left to give you some breathing room. Attack the enemies. Our rat is probably going to follow you up here, including any other enemies that might end up following you. But for dual bleed daggers it's pretty easy. Now deal with the rat. Now the other flask thrower. Kinda funny they throw flasks right at you. Another rat and another enemy there too. You really don't want them interfering with the boss of the fort battle. This is why we actually kill them all here, before we head up the stairs to the top of the fort. Now you can summon your wolves, because once you reach the boss at the top, you probably won't have time before the boss starts hitting you. Here he comes, the Golden Knight we have to defeat. Our summons will tank for us and take the boss's attention. You can always use your daggers ranged attacks. Just look at how much damage we do from the Reduvia Blade's special ability. The knight actually fell down. But anyways, you get the hang of it, right? Defeating the knight isn't really hard when you have your Reduvia blade, ranged attack, and also your summons to take the aggro for you. And after you defeat the Golden Knight, you get the Ash of War Bloody Slash, which is what we came here for. Now, to equip your new Ash of War to your weapon, you first have to rest at any grace, and then go to the Ashes of War menu, select your weapon, and then the Ash of War you want. However, you need an item to do this first, the Whetstone. Getting it is super simple. From the Gatefront Ruins Grace, just ride your horse into the ruins, skip past all of the foes, and right behind this wall here, you'll find a set of stairs. Go down, and right here, simply open the chest and you'll find your Whetstone knife. So now you can equip your Ashes of Wars. Alright, so now we have both a Blood Great Knife empowered to the new Ash of War, and also the Reduvia Dagger. But ideally, what you really want is 2 Blood Great Knives for the start of the game. One that we already start out with, and then a second one because, as you can see, the Blood Great Knife actually has more blood loss build up on hits, so 64 here, as opposed to the Reduvia, which is 52. Even at higher enhancements, the Reduvia will still cause less blood loss. Also, it is a lot easier to enhance your Great Knives through smithing, because they only cost normal smithing stones. Reduvia, on the other hand, as a unique weapon, costs somber smithing stones, which are a lot rarer. Now, just as a note, I know you can actually get 2 Reduvias in the same run, but doing this requires you to have a friend and then have this friend drop the item for you. Which, well, is not really viable for a lot of players. This is why I prefer to go with 1 Reduvia and 1 Great Knife, and later on 2 Great Knives. To get a second Great Knife, we have to farm it from an enemy at the very start of the Lakeside Crystal Cave, an area to the northwest of the Liurnia of the Lakes region, pretty close to the first Grace of the region lake-facing cliffs. Always remember that you don't have to go to Stormveil Castle to reach this. You can always just drop down the broken bridge right at this section of the map, follow the path alongside the cliffs, and you'll soon reach this bonfire just fine, without having to defeat Margit or Godric. To get to the Lakeside Crystal Cave, however, it's a bit misleading because it appears to be here, but you actually have to get it from the lake part of Liurnia. So you drop down the lake, through the steps, then just follow right ahead, and the Crystal Cave will be right here at this part of the map actually, that I have my marker on. Once inside the cave, just head here. Now be careful because, as you can see, there will be an enemy behind these bushes that will try to ambush you. Defeat this enemy and he has a chance of dropping the Great Knife. If he doesn't, well, all you have to do is go back to the bonfire, which is right next to the enemy, rest, and it will have respawned, so it is pretty fast and very simple to do. Just repeat this until you get another Great Knife. Now that we have our second Great Knife, we also have to duplicate our Bloody Slash Ash of War, so we can then add it to our newly acquired Great Knife. Doing this requires you to talk to the blacksmith at Round Table Hold, while having an item called Lost Ashes of War, which will be consumed to duplicate it. There is a very easy one that you can get as soon as the start of the game, so it is right here from a merchant in the isolated merchant shack area to the west of the Weeping Peninsula. So from the starter point you head southeast, cross the Bridge of Sacrifice, south, and then start heading west until you reach the isolated shack. Then just speak with the merchant who is right here next to the Grace and buy your Lost Ashes of War for 3000 runes. Now we still have a last weapon to pick, the Flail. The reason we are going with Flail is because it is actually a strike weapon, unlike our daggers which are slash and pierce. Some enemies in the game, like the miners, they basically don't take any damage from slashing and piercing weapons. With a Flail, however, we can hit them just fine. They are even slow, so we can actually stun lock them through Flail attacks. So investing in a Flail is going to be great for these resistant enemies, especially because we get enough attributes to also equip a 100% physical negation shield on our other hand, so you can use your Flail in one hand and the shield in the other to block attacks. So our Dexterity character can really cover all of the spots and be left without any weakness whatsoever. You can still backstab with flails too, which is funny. And getting the flail is super easy. From the gate front, Grace, go to the other side of the ruins, and open this chest right here. Flails are also quite powerful in mounted combat, because by using your heavy attack and charging it, you can hit multiple enemies at once, just look at that. And since mounted combat is our biggest weakness, with this we can avoid that just fine. Honestly, as far as armors, you can always go with the Cadence set for the early game. It does have pretty high defenses all around, and farming it is also somewhat easy. It drops from the knights. So right from the Aguil Lake South, Grace, right as you spawn, you'll notice a Cadent Knight will start patrolling the road. So just go after him. It's actually very easy to defeat him through your Bloody Slash ability from your Ashes of War. See, he already went down with just one hit. And see, he already dropped the Cadent Helm. Alright, now let's talk about attribute point allocation for our Dexterity character. I recommend you increase Vigor until around 15 to give you a nice layer of hit points that is sure to help you survive in the early game. After that, rush for at the very least 20 Dexterity, as this is our main damage attribute. Now you can of course keep continuing investing all out on Dexterity, but I would suggest you split the points somewhat. Mind, for example, can be very useful until around 20, if you want to use the more powerful summons that cost a lot of FP, and also spam more of your special skills. Endurance can be useful too, but we do have Radagon's Sword Seal for +5, and later you can also get Godric's Great Rune for another +5 to all of your stats actually. I have recently released a guide link to the site here on how you can get all sorts of extra power-ups to your attribute points without needing to level at all. So for a quick recap, 15 Vigor, 20 Dexterity, and after that a split between the other useful attribute points, so Dexterity, some Mind, and some Vigor as well, as you progress through the game. You can always respec your character later on, so if you're not satisfied with your attribute points, or want to try a different split, please feel free to do so. This is mostly to give you something that you can follow for the beginning of the game, to help you through the open world areas. Alright, so now let's do a quick section on how to play the build. As a Dagger character you do very high critical and backstab damage, so remember you can always crouch and then sneak around the enemy to get some backstabs on them for huge amounts of damage. Besides that, for enemies that can be quickly staggered, you want to just attack them to death, especially because you trigger your blood effects very fast. For shield enemies, remember you can always dodge or just equip a shield of your own to bait their attacks, because if you try to attack them as they have their shield off, they'll just easily block your attacks. So you bait them, go for a backstab, or attack when they open their guard. You always have your ranged Bloody Slash attack for huge damage, which is especially useful for the big enemies like the Knight here. See, even if the damage isn't high, with just 2 Bloody Slash hits, we already inflicted the dangerous Knight with blood loss, while remaining mostly safe. And you can hit multiple enemies with your Bloody Slash for even higher damage. Just remember, it costs a little bit of your health as well, so try to manage that carefully as to not lose too much health. Sometimes, depending on the enemy packs, you can even just slice and dice through them all. Because of how fast you attack, it's not really hard to stagger them into submission. For a showcase, with our build and all of the gear that we now have, let us try the infamous battle against Margit the Fell Omen. We got at level 25, which isn't really that high for this battle. Begin by summoning your trusty skeletons, who will take Margit's attention away from you. Wait for him to argue them, he already has. Look at how much damage our Bloody Slash ability deals to Margit. Now let's see how much damage we deal with the blood loss. Just look at that. Bloody Slash hits, just look at the damage. And you also attack from range. Not that high range, but can be easy to hit. And there we go. Alright everyone, so this was it for my Dexterity build guide. I hope I've managed to show you how powerful your Dexterity bleed based character can be even at the very early game. If you found this guide useful, then please remember to like, subscribe and even consider becoming a channel member. Thank you for watching and see you next time, friends.